Looks like we're talking reading today.
It sure
Yeah,
does.
and we talk reading almost every
Every
day.
day.
Yeah,
We
it's
do.
a big deal, right?
It is.
Yeah.
A lot of questions.
And there's all these different ways to do it.
So many approaches.
Yeah. How did you learn to read, Nancy?
Oh, I mean, it's almost like you don't think about it until you look back.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how did I learn to read?
Yeah.
I mean, the first school I went to was a little more of that implicit. We'll just show you the words. And, they probably went over the letter sounds briefly. But it was more, you kind of analyze the word and figure it out. Then I switched schools in first grade. And I had a Becca Phonics. And it was very explicit. And very much you're learning those relationships between the letters and the sounds and building words.
When you say explicit, can you define that? Because
My goodness.
it's questionable.
I don't know if I can explain it. So I think that explicit just means that you are explicitly teaching the relationships between the sounds and the letters, and you're building the words from that. Is that correct? I mean, I think that's
Yeah,
what
it's
it
just
is. Does that sound
basically
right?
clear instruction with clear examples, and sometimes reading instruction goes with it.
Yeah.
And you've shared with me before how you learned to read.
Yeah, it was whole word.
Whole word.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Did
Dick
it
and
work okay
Jane-
for you?
Yeah, it was fine. So that's
We're both
just-
Dick and Jane
You were too?
generation.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
However, I have a very imprinted memory. My mother was an educator, and I had no idea what she was talking about, but I have this memory of her coming in with her hands on her hips and saying, "You're not getting phonics in school, so you're going to get it at home." And I'm like,
boy.
"Okay, whatever." I don't know.
Whatever that means.
Yes,
Remember
Mom.
that.
Yes, Mom. That's pretty much what I was saying. And so when I came to teach my own kids, that memory was there.
Came back.
Yeah,
Right.
and I found that lots of homeschoolers were using
Sure.
phonics.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure.
It's
I did. Yeah,
it's
that's-
been really
interesting.
popular for a long time.
It is interesting how the methodology pendulum tends to swing. It's
It
like,
really does.
for a while it's all this, and
And
then
then there's more research, and then there's
we
this
go back
one.
here, and then it's like, well,
Then it comes full circle.
full circle back to where we started, but sometimes with a new name, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So then a lot of times it's like, well, this really isn't a new thing, but we now are calling it this.
Right.
And it really can be hard to stay on top of all of the
Right.
current.
And that buzzword right now is science of reading.
Yes.
Okay, and about 40 states now, and
Is it that
the
many?
District of Columbia are requiring that in various
Schools?
forms. Yeah, in schools.
wow.
So you've probably heard that, and don't let it scare you, because it's a very specific approach,
It is.
but it is incorporating
Right.
phonics, and so it's not, it's not like you have to run it through an organization and have it
Yeah.
approved.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's a whole different
Sure.
situation. But this is a situation where you are having to incorporate phonics instruction instead of doing
So
the
when-
Dick and Jane thing.
So when you hear science of reading, you basically know that, okay, what that means is it's not an approach or a methodology. It's just basically backed by a compilation of years of research that they figured out that this is how your brain best works when you learn to read.
And that research comes from the year 2000. I mean, it's not new research necessarily.
Right.
So,
That's interesting.
So I think that's helpful too, to
Yes.
see that it's got a long history of working for people.
Right.
That's good to know, because I think that it's easy to go science of reading. Oh no, I didn't do that with my kids. I got to go find something.
they
I mean, it's like, well,
exactly.
It really is just a new name for something that's
Right.
been around for a
Or
while.
the opposite, like, oh, the states are mandating it, it must be bad.
Right.
Right.
And so
Yes.
it's got a whole different deal. And what it's focused on is the 5 main basic
Right.
aspects.
And basically teaching phonics with systematic and clear explicit instruction, in a logical order with clear instruction, and then focusing on those key elements. What are those key elements?
You wrote an article about this.
Yeah,
at
I
one point, didn't you,
did.
Ruth?
Yeah, I did. Make sure that and it progresses. So you have the phonemes, which are the sounds, and then that you're able to recognize those sounds, and that there's very specific, you said, explicit instruction.
Yeah.
Right.
And how you're going to teach that exactly,
like a
And-
multi-sensory way.
yeah. And so the aim is for fluency, to be able to read so that it's just second nature to you, right? And it also should include new vocabulary and reading comprehension,
Right.
Which is the ultimate goal.
So you have those 5 things. You have phonological awareness, you've got phonics and decoding, you have fluency, vocabulary comprehension, and text comprehension. So let's talk about those a little bit. Because some people, like, they're saying phonological awareness, what is that? Like,
Yeah.
it has to do with just the sound of the word, so your oral vocabulary. It's not the written word yet. So, and how do you learn those things? How do children learn those things? Rhyming, alliteration, learning about syllables, things like that will
Yeah.
make the nursery rhymes. I think organically they're learning it in their
Yeah.
oral vocabulary.
Because the way you and I learned in school, not at home, was guessing, kind of figuring things out, memorizing. All of those skills are very important, but a lot of context clues
Right.
Yeah.
and repetition and
Patterns.
all
Right.
the patterns, and so this is phonics is looking at the parts.
Exactly. So now you've got your phonological awareness and that oral vocabulary. Now you're learning phonics and decoding, which is looking at the written word. So you kind of have that foundation of the sounds, and now you're looking at the written word and using those to decipher what they say. So
Yeah,
figuring
so
out what they
the
say.
sounded out, that kind of those
Right.
kinds of
And really, that's the
instructions.
bridge to the fluency, right?
right.
That it's kind of a bridge between the phonological awareness and the fluency, the phonics and decoding. You're learning.
Understanding all those little building blocks that are making up
Right.
that big word.
And
Right.
well, the argument I hear a lot is that, well, English does have a lot of rules, but we also break a lot of rules.
Yeah.
You know,
It's true. We do.
because we pull words from so many different languages.
Yes.
And that's one reason why people learn English, because it's so versatile, and it has this growing flexibility to
Yeah,
it.
we're always taking on new words too, aren't we, in English?
Yes,
It's like,
yeah.
when did that become a word? I didn't know that was a word.
Yeah, we're not going there with that today. But those things are actually the people who support phonics say that it actually a large percentage of the words can be figured out that
Right.
way, and then.
Yeah.
Then you have enough tools and enough bandwidth to spend time on figuring out those other words,
Exactly.
using context clues, using a sounding out.
The
and those-
exceptions
really
to the
good point.
rule.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's interesting, though. I mean, thinking about, so you guys both having whole word, you know, or maybe that more implicit, and you learned to read fine. So why do you think then we hear so much about using explicit phonics and things like Orton-Gillingham, which we'll talk about a little bit today. So why is it important then? Is it only important for some kids? Do you think everybody needs explicit phonics like Orton-Gillingham methodology these days, or do you think that some kids just like you guys did just really pick it up naturally?
That's a great question, because we get those phone calls because we have those natural readers
Yeah.
that we talk about, and they say, and they call and say, "Oh, my child just picked up reading naturally."
Like, I don't. I didn't hardly have to teach
But I
them
need
anything.
something for phonics. They haven't learned phonics, and
Yeah.
I don't know. In my humble opinion, it's like, well,
Yeah.
bring in your spelling,
Yeah,
a spelling
you can do
program
that.
that incorporates the phonics, and
Yeah.
that
And then
will-
maybe you can use something that's a little bit simpler for phonics if they're just getting it quickly
Right.
and you don't need all of those steps. It can save you time.
Sure.
But some kids seem to really need that. Would you say that? I mean, especially if they're struggling
Absolutely.
with maybe dyslexia or another, learning
Yes.
issue where they're just looking at those whole words and they're so overwhelmed and they're so
Right.
confused, and they need those tools
And that's
very
a good
step by
point,
step to
because that
break it down.
because that spelling brings about the encoding, which is the opposite of decoding. So
Yeah.
the encoding is hearing that sound and recalling those letters or representations of letters and then putting it down on paper. So I think struggling readers do benefit
Yeah.
from both the decoding and the encoding,
encoding,
the
yeah.
phonics and the spelling, and just doing simple like dictating a sound or sounds and having your child write those sounds on paper. And then maybe using like flashcards to have them look at the sound on the flashcard and then recall it orally.
Yeah.
And I think both of those are beneficial to the struggling reader, and
Yeah,
you're
definitely.
maximizing that learning.
Yeah.
And it's funny how different those processes are. I know we've talked a little about this before, but that decoding and encoding, because I think it can puzzle us sometimes when we
Yeah.
see, oh, my child is reading at a 6th grade level, but they can't spell anything.
I had a parent just the other day say that reading really well, does well on reading comprehension, spelling atrocious.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's that mirror of
Yeah.
that same skill,
Yeah.
right?
That's-
And so that's why I'm hesitant to omit the spelling, or you know, I had my 2nd grade teacher had us for extra points after recess to sound out supercalifragilisticexpialidocious,
that's fun. I remember
and we
that.
had we had to write we had to write that down and using phonics, you know.
Oh, boy.
And I was like,
Sounds
I'm
kinda
winning
fun.
this prize.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, little bit of the geek as a 2nd grader, but that's the encoding skills,
Right.
is figuring. Well,
Absolutely.
I mean, I had to listen to that word and understand what it was saying, and then I had to write it down.
Exactly.
And that's the
Build it.
encoding part,
Yeah.
and build it.
Right.
Right.
I like that.
Sound
I like
by
that word
sound.
because it's one thing to take it apart and understand the concepts, and then also to understand the meaning and all
Yeah.
of the nuances that are being
Right.
said there. But then the other one is building the language yourself.
Yeah.
I like.
Right.
Yeah.
I like
Right.
that.
Right. Yeah, it's
But
very
the-
interesting.
Yeah, but talking about the struggling reader again, it's like so many, and we do get so many phone calls. It's like my child's just
So
not learning
many.
to read, and
Yes.
we've tried this and we've tried that, and
Yeah.
you know, sometimes it might just be a maturity thing where they're just taking more time to process what they're learning. You know, some parents also, like if they've used a program level 1, they go back and repeat level 1, and the child, it just clicks.
Yeah.
Or they go back and just use the reader, and
It's interesting because I think I've talked to some parents who have said, you know, I did all about reading with my first 2 kids. It was so great. They had dyslexia. Now I'm on this 3rd child and we're really frustrated. And you talk to them a little bit more and find out, well, that 3rd child, maybe it's a lot of extra steps that they don't need. And so sometimes, you know, you buy a program like this for one child who's really struggling, and then you
Sure.
think, well, it's great. We'll use it with the next
Right.
child. And you don't really think about, you
Right.
know, well, where is that child at and how are they processing? And then you get to that next child. And that's not to say it's not a good program for
Right.
everybody. But you might find that, oh, this child is a little bit more frustrated because they're saying, I already know
It's
this. I don't
slowing them
want to do
down.
all of these extra steps when my brain is already there.
And that might be just a matter of you didn't start the right level,
True. Yeah.
or maybe they're at the last level
Yeah.
of that book.
Right.
You know, that might
But
be
I think it's good to know that maybe there are students that don't need
sure.
that very, very detailed, not that systematic's not always good, but to have all of that, you know, the activities and the drilling of, with all the phonograms, a lot of students are like, I already
I have
am
this,
here.
let's move on.
Let's move on.
Right.
I don't want to keep doing that, you know? So I think that is a thing that we do hear sometimes. And
Right.
then we hear the other way around too, is like, well, I'm using this program and it worked great for my older kids. Well, they didn't have dyslexia. Now this student
Right.
is really struggling,
Yeah.
and that program is not giving them enough practice.
Right.
So I think it just speaks to that, how individual every student is. And what this one needs may be exactly the opposite of what that
Right.
one needs, you know?
And you know, some parents automatically go to the dyslexia camp, you know, but
Yeah.
you know, it could be maybe an eye conversion issue, or like I
Sure.
said, maybe
Yeah.
slow processing, or so don't get discouraged. Like
Yeah.
homeschooling is the best environment for that.
Absolutely,
And just, you know,
yeah.
you can work on fluency too with like something like victory drill books, where you're focusing on like a target
Yeah.
speed of reading. read a page until they reach that target speed, move on to the next page. When they complete that book, go back to the beginning and get faster. So
Yeah.
there's things you can do to help that fluency.
As a homeschool parent, it's the best situation, honestly.
It is.
Yeah.
I've been asked before by parents, is there some way where they can just learn without me? And really, honestly, the best way is this one-on-one.
one-on-one.
No matter
Absolutely.
what methodology you're using, because you can see
is so
where they're
true.
struggling and you can see the
Yes.
patterns. And you're rolling up your sleeves and you're really
Right.
involved with this process. And so be aware, it takes a lot of time, right?
It does.
Even if you have a kid
But it
that's
will
just
pay off.
clicking
Yeah.
for it. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So we're getting so many more calls these days from parents that their kids are struggling.
Yeah.
And a lot of times after talking to them, we're finding that yes, there are sometimes vision issues and sometimes there
Yeah.
is even diagnosed dyslexia. So we have a couple programs today we're going
We
to talk
do.
about, right? And I'm going to be asking you guys a lot of questions because you guys are the experts on these. But
Use that with a big grain of salt, experts.
but I am excited to even learn a little bit more, especially about this new P.R.I.D.E program that we have. That is, what does this stand for, Gina? The acronym.
That's an acronym.
Yes.
P.R.I.D.E. It's
Right.
an acronym for.
Yes,
Is it
so
phonemic?
it has phoneme, recognition, instruction, developing, and empowerment.
Okay.
So this is a new program. So how this term is currently used is not what it really is today. It's just a reading program.
Just
It's a
an
reading and
acronym.
spelling program
Yeah.
Yeah.
that is very helpful for
I've
especially
been
struggling
nicknaming it the Lion Cub because there's
Lion Cub, the
yeah,
Lion
There you go.
Lion Cub reading program.
Right.
That's how I remember it in my head, honestly.
So
and
this
this is
one-
Orton-Gillingham.
It
right?
is Orton-Gillingham.
Okay.
And so is All About Reading.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So I think it'll be
both
good to
very
kind of
solid.
compare
Yep.
programs. Very thorough.
Right.
They both
Very
have
explicit.
phonics.
Yep.
So maybe we can kind of see what are some of the differences
Yeah.
between these two
So-
programs.
And they
You
both
use
have-
the word Orton-Gillingham now. Do you know?
Well,
Do you know what that is?
Orton-Gillingham. So there was a doctor, Orton, and I think Anna Gillingham was an educator. And I
Yeah.
think it was back in the early
together.
1900s, maybe the 1940s, that they kind of came together and started working on helping kids that had word blindness at the time, which now we would call dyslexia. And they developed a program that over time really has shown great success
very
in helping
effective,
kids that are struggling with seeing words correctly or just that word blindness, not being able to, just fluently. Some kids just take off, like we said, but so many others today are struggling with seeing the letters backwards or they're missing things in the words. So,
And interesting that Orton-Gillingham method uses those 5 pillars, that phonological awareness, the phonics, the fluency, the
so it's similar
vocabulary
to the science of
comprehension.
reading then. Would you say? It's pretty much science of
Yeah.
reading.
If it's Orton-Gillingham, it will automatically be Science
Pass
of
for
Reading.
Science of Reading, okay.
And because Orton-Gillingham is an actual methodology,
Method,
you have to
yeah.
get it approved and all
Right.
of that kind of thing.
Right.
But there's more to it than just the 5 pillars.
Right.
It has to be multisensory.
Yes, very multisensory.
Yeah.
So,
And it has to have an individualized kind of approach, right? And it has that explicit
right,
teaching,
that direct instruction.
right?
Yeah.
And then it has to be cumulative, so you're not just dancing all over the place, right? And figuring out this word and then figuring out this word. It's very systematic.
And there's a lot of programs out there, and it feels like one will be like a buzzword for a while. Like,
Right.
for a while back when I had some kids, they went to a little classical co-op, and it was all about the Riggs method.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so that's what I was familiar with. And then a few years after that, I had a son really struggling with dyslexia, so we did the Barton method.
Yes.
And there's so many out there that do use that
There really is.
Orton-Gillingham methodology, but have just a little different spin to them.
And did you have to take a class for that, Barton? Or someone, whoever was teaching it, had to take the class?
I did not do it. I took him to a tutor for that because it is so intensive. And I think that is one of the things about it is a lot of times these programs do require you to go through some lengthy trainings because it's so in-depth and there's so much to know. And if you don't do it just right, which I like these two programs.
I know, that brings us back to these because they are so easy to use.
Yes, they're both
Yes.
pick up and go as far as once you understand what you're doing, right? And there's very scripted instructions,
right? So they're the
So
same
you
in
don't
that
have
regard.
to have the training.
Yeah, the teacher guide is very scripted, laid out. You don't have to guess what you're doing. They both have review cards. They both have those multi-sensory components.
The letter tiles.
With the letter tiles.
So this is all about reading, and that's the P.R.I.D.E letter tiles.
The line cub, the whiteboards.
Okay.
So, they're very multi-sensory. They're about the same price range.
Okay.
And then they both encourage you to move at your own pace. Some might move faster, some might move slower.
Yeah.
And then they have that learning review, what you were discussing for struggling readers that is really good, that repeating and reviewing.
Yeah,
So.
always drilling the information over and over. And very multisensory, and I think that's so good because it does seem like for these kids that struggle, they need to take this information in all of those three main ways, the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic. And so they are often writing as they say something, and they're seeing it at the same time. And then a lot of times there's the games and all of that
So let's
too.
look at a level 1 student workbook on both if you want to pull that one.
Let's see.
All right.
I can hold that one.
Thank you.
With this one, you'll see
I
that
can achieve that today.
the neat thing about this one is the reading and spelling are incorporated together.
Okay.
Now, All About Reading does have a separate spelling program, and they want you to establish like a strong reading foundation before you go into the spelling. So you start the spelling at level 2 of the reading.
After you've done level 1.
This one is incorporated. So this one's black and white.
Do you want me to hold that?
Sure.
Okay.
So you have the words you're practicing, you have some story summary going on, and then if you want to turn to a spelling page there, that's where you're doing your sound, your dictations there with the words and sounds and sentences. And then
This is the first level, so
Yes.
I like the very large lines
Yes,
and the
very
easy
nice.
to read.
and then with the All About Reading, you can see there's color, more color.
So much color.
There's a lot of cutting activity. That's the multisensory approach they're using.
It's
and
very pretty, the
it
pages
is.
are.
And then in the back, I don't know if that's in the teacher guide or the student book, but there's games in this one.
Oh, yeah, here's one.
There you go. So there's
This
games.
is read the
after.
word.
Yep.
This is near
So
the end, I guess,
Yeah,
right?
so there's several different games that are incorporated into the introduction lesson at the end. They're saying, okay, let's play this game on this page.
So
And-
both of them have games incorporated as
so
part of the
they're-
lessons.
Yeah, this one,
Okay.
yeah.
So this is game 17, so you're reading words like jump and sand, strip, so you've got multi-consonants together,
Exactly,
right? Blends.
The All About Reading, though, has these beautiful
Readers, I
readers.
love those
Yes.
readers.
And
Yeah, I can
yeah,
hold
you can-
one, sure.
Runt pig,
They're so
cobweb.
They have really great
Nice
content.
quality.
Yeah, they're
Very hard.
very nice quality. This one does have some decodable readers, but we don't have them right now. You can get them on the publisher's
Do they make
website.
suggestions of other books you could read?
Actually, they do have decodable readers available,
Okay.
but we just don't have
We just
them.
don't have
Yeah,
them.
we just started carrying this.
Yeah, we just started carrying it, so maybe down the road. But
Yeah.
and they also have games on the publisher's website, just little fun games, online games that you
computer
can play
games.
as well.
Okay.
So.
Very
Nice.
And All About Reading always reminds you at the end of the lesson to read aloud 20 minutes. So
Okay.
That's a really good reminder
From
as
here?
well. Yeah.
Or
no,
a read
just
aloud
reading
book?
aloud. Yeah.
Okay.
So the parents reading
Yes.
aloud, right? Okay.
Gotcha.
That's actually a very key point to a child's ability to read is if there are books in the home,
Yes.
books in the home, they see you reading, not on your device.
Yeah.
Reading real books.
Yes.
Okay.
So important.
And and then also them hearing the words aloud. And a child can comprehend much higher than their actual reading level. So
They're
I always
building
like to
vocabulary and-
aim higher than their reading level,
Yes.
you know?
Very good point.
My mother, like another mother story, sorry. My mother was reading a book to herself, and my brother was probably 5, 6, something like that. He had been learning to read. And he says, "Mom, what are you doing?" And she said, "I'm secret reading." And he said, "Can you teach me how to do
secret
that?"
reading.
Yeah. And I
knew the right words to use, right?
Yes, she did. And so getting to that secret reading is a goal.
That's so cute.
But we have to hear what our kids are saying, so it's good for them to take time reading out loud too,
Oh,
and taking
absolutely,
turns.
'cause then they can practice their inflection and fluency. And
Why don't you read what Tom is yelling? You know,
Yeah.
that's kind of a fun thing.
that is.
That
That's a good
is,
point.
yeah.
Uh,
Use
permission
different
to
voices.
permission to yell.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They love that, don't they?
Right. Yeah.
So both of these are great programs that are multi-sensory, Orton-Gillingham based, systematic, explicit phonics, about the same price, you're
Yes.
saying, Gina?
Let's look at, we didn't look at the teacher guide yet. Let's pull that
Yeah,
out
let's
and take
do
a
that.
look at it.
Okay.
You listed those off very well. I'm proud
Well, I
of
was
you.
trying to remember.
If you want to
Yeah.
hold that one up and
Yeah,
see how
get
they're
my
very
copy
clear.
out of the way.
They have.
Are they scripted?
They are, and
Okay.
the scripted is in blue on this one, and you can clearly see
So
on
it's
that
going to tell
one
you
what to
exactly
do.
what to say.
Yes.
That makes it very easy.
They show you what review cards to use each day, and just very easy to follow.
Yeah.
And this one has a video instruction when you first buy the program to kind of show you what the lesson one
That's so nice.
looks like, and
Yeah.
that one will give you very clear instruction on how to set up your magnetic dry erase board
Okay.
and the letter tiles and things. So they're both very clear.
Okay.
This one has a little bit of that. The All About Reading has a little bit of color to it. As you turn the pages there, you'll see.
So this one has a video that helps you get it set up in the beginning.
Right, and
Are there
that one-
videos as you go along?
No.
Okay.
No, just kind
Just
of
in the
an
beginning.
overall. Yeah, this is how you're
Okay,
going to teach.
yeah. Which
Yeah,
is nice because then you feel like
Familiarity.
you're getting everything
Right.
established well and you know you're headed in the right direction
Right,
at least.
and
Yeah.
it has like an introduction lesson, a practice lesson, and a reinforcement lesson for each phonics concept. And
Okay,
then,
so that's that systematic
Yes.
review, right, happening.
Yep.
Very
and
cool.
the nice thing about both of these programs is there's multiple levels. So I think each of them have, this one goes up to level 4, but it also has a pre-reading. And this one kind of has a pre-reading as well, and it has 5 levels. So
Okay.
it takes you.
So they're kind of ending at a similar place, but do you feel like this one, P.R.I.D.E is getting you a little bit farther in the reading on
Not
grade
necessar-
level?
I think they pretty much end at the same
About
spot.
the same place.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And
so good to
after
know.
after finishing all the levels, I mean, kids have the foundation to really use those word attack skills. So they know their words. But
So they
they're-
have the tools to really decipher
Right.
anything at that point.
Yes, but they should be.
That's
you know,
great.
Yeah, they should still kind of read at their grade level because of the maturity. Yeah.
Sure.
but-
I think if I had used the phrase word attack, my boys would have really enjoyed that a lot
They would have been
more.
more excited about it.
Right. But that's what you're doing. You're decoding, you're figuring out the code. It's just,
Right.
Yeah.
And so.
but you need those tools. And so by
Exactly.
the end of either one of these programs, you've got all of those
Yeah,
things.
they have those skills. Yeah, so they should be set. And
You and I were kind of looking at each one. The order in which the sounds are introduced is a little
they're
different.
different, aren't they? But
Yeah.
and you'll find that in a lot of different programs, how they introduce their.
Yeah.
So the scope and sequence is going to be a little different, but they're going to end about the same
Yeah.
place. And the P.R.I.D.E reading program, it has the spelling incorporated,
Yeah.
interwoven, and this one you would need to do a separate spelling after level 1.
Yeah, which they have in All About Spelling.
All
Yes,
About
you just,
Spelling, right.
Yeah, incorporate that if you want. Yep.
So then to start off with, what would you need for this program here? So
Yeah, so if there is a beginning one, but let's say you're ready for level 1, you have the teaching guide,
Okay.
you have the student workbook.
the teacher and the student book.
Yep, so
Okay.
these two guys.
Yep.
And then
And this is consumable, the
Yes.
student, right?
And then
Okay.
the sound cards, which are used
Okay.
with all the levels. And then,
You use that for all the levels?
yes, so you'll
Okay.
have that.
So once you purchase it, you've got it
you-
for the whole time?
Exactly.
Okay.
And then this letter tiles and activity kit, which has all the letters and
That's
the
really
magnetic
cute.
I'd like
board.
to look at a couple
Yeah.
of those.
And is
kind
this
of pull 'em
also
out.
used in every level?
It is. So
Okay.
once you buy it the first time,
You've got
You're
it.
you
done.
have it.
Nice.
And you see how they're color coded?
Those are cute.
With the level.
Yes.
So level 1 is yellow. You're going
Okay,
to be using.
okay.
I started with a different
Yeah.
color. Okay. Oh, so you don't have to keep adding stuff.
Right.
Okay. And so this is the yellow dot, and then there's the
These are the tiles you're going to be using for level 1.
NHR.
Does it come with a
sounds
little
with that.
whiteboard too?
It does.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
dry erase markers.
Okay.
Yep.
And a little dice for games?
Yeah. So it's all there.
Okay. Little eraser.
This is handy that they're delineated,
Yeah, all
so you know what
color-coded,
you're going
yep.
to cover.
is nice.
Very cool.
And the same with the sound cards. They're all color coded.
Okay.
As you can
I like
see.
the little box
Oh.
that they're stored in. That's handy.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
then all about reading, they also have letter tiles,
So
don't they?
with this one, now the letter tiles are going to be punched out, right? And then are we putting
There's
those on magnets?
yeah, which are in here. Yeah.
Okay. And then you're also doing these on a whiteboard.
Yes,
with
now this one's a
one-
larger whiteboard. You
Okay.
want at least a 2 foot by 3 foot, I believe.
And it doesn't come with that.
Right.
But that's easy to do at home.
Yeah.
And this is a program you used for a while.
I didn't use the reading, I used the spelling.
Spelling.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So-
And I've heard of people doing that when you've got a natural reader, and then you could start with all about spelling if they're just
Absolutely.
absorbing that.
Yes, because that's also going to help with the reading as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of coming in from the back door,
Right.
right, with that.
So
But
even if you
you're-
have a natural reader, using it for spelling might be a good idea if they're struggling with spelling.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And this
and
is,
that's often where we see the issue.
Right.
Is, you know.
And this kit can be used for the reading and the spelling. And then you have the review box there, and
Okay. This is one. It used to be you bought two different
Yes,
kits,
Right.
and now it's
right.
one.
now it's one.
Right.
So now this is
Making it
good for
easy.
both,
That's
all about
very
reading,
nice.
all about spelling, every level.
Right.
And they would need to purchase, though, two separate boxes with
If you're doing the reading and the spelling.
spelling, okay.
But the box is so nice because look at those little dividers.
to keep things organized
Yes.
nicely.
So,
And why? Tell me a little bit about how that's used. The box.
yeah, so you have your phonogram. It's the spelling will have a little bit more divider cards because there's more cards, but you'll have your review cards, the material that you haven't mastered yet, and then and you keep the cards that you're going to be used later. So
Okay.
the cards come in like a cardstock type. They're perforated, so you're going to tear those out and then keep those.
Store them in here.
Yeah.
Nice.
As you master them as a child,
Then you have
you move them
put
to a
those-
different place.
Exactly.
Okay. So you're seeing your own progress.
That's
Yeah.
true.
I love how easy both of these programs
They
make
really are.
Orton-Gillingham Phonics.
Yes.
Because it can be very complicated.
So
Right.
complicated,
And-
and that was my only experience with it until I started here at Rainbow, and I was like,
And
wait,
you needed like
It
a
doesn't have to be.
certificate or something.
Yes.
And now they've made it very
Right.
Doable for
home-friendly.
parents.
So
at home.
nice.
Yeah.
Right.
And it just guides you step by step.
Yes.
It really
So,
does, yeah.
especially if you're really feeling concerned about either your child struggling with reading or like, I want to get this right. Reading is important.
Right.
It really
right?
is.
And it can be a very stressful
Right.
thing to teach a child.
And so this is all laid out for you very nicely.
Yeah.
I do
Awesome.
think because it's the gate to learning everything
is,
else
really.
until kids are reading fluently, you're kind of that's the gatekeeper for
Right.
everything, and so it is so important. And I
Yeah.
love that we have programs that have taken a very successful program and made it doable for moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas to do with their kids at home or teachers in a classroom. You know,
love it.
Absolutely.
it's awesome.
And honestly, that's where that transition starts is like the end of grade 3 reading level and the beginning of grade 4. You that student is now transitioning to read to learn.
Read to learn.
More
Rather than
independently,
learning to
yeah.
read.
Right.
And so there's all of those skills. And so if they've had a systematic approach, they have all
Right,
the
they
tools
have
that
those,
they
right?
need, and then they can start focusing on the meaning, more of
Yes.
the meaning of words, and really digging in and finding the content that's there in reading, which is absolutely
Yes.
important.
Yes.
We get excited about
Yeah.
reading, don't we, guys?
Yes, I'm like, if I have a soapbox, that's one of them for sure, right? Absolutely. But it doesn't mean that everybody has to learn that way,
No,
right?
not at all.
And homeschoolers have been using different kinds of phonics methods.
Yes.
I mean, we've got pages upon pages.
We have so many.
Of phonics programs,
Right, we
because
do.
that's been a tried and true,
Yeah.
and
We
very
have,
traditional.
Yeah, some that
approach.
have been used for years, and yeah, they work. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's why we love so much to talk to families individually, because when a child is struggling, we do have those tools to help guide them through. Would this be a good program? So call us anytime if you're wondering about your student, or is this normal? Are they struggling with this?
Or do I really need something like this?
That's right. Yeah, we love to do it. We love to chat with you. So give us a call anytime.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.